It had been 15 years since I last heard his voice. 15 years since Daniel slammed the door, leaving behind the echo of our last fight and the scent of his cologne fading into silence. The house had grown older with me. The paint on the walls had cracked, the garden he once loved was overrun with ivy, and every clock in the house ticked too loudly, reminding me of the time that never stopped moving even when I wished it would. I used to wait for him in the early years. Every night, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the crickets and the sound of passing cars, hoping one of them would slow down, that I'd see his face in the headlights. But no one ever stopped. Eventually, I stopped waiting. I learned how to exist again, not live, just exist. I started teaching piano lessons to neighborhood kids, filled the silence of my home with the sound of small, uncertain fingers pressing on ivory keys. It helped a little. That evening was ordinary. The sky was gray and heavy, and the smell of rain lingered in the air. I had just finished dinner, soup for one, as always, and sat down by the window to read when I heard it. A knock. Soft, uncertain. I froze. Visitors were rare, especially after dark. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the wind. Maybe someone lost. But then it came again, a little louder this time. I opened the door slowly. And there he was. Daniel. Older. Thinner. His once dark hair now streaked with gray. The man who had walked out of my life 15 years ago stood on my doorstep, drenched from the rain, clutching something in his hand, a faded leather envelope. My breath caught. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It felt like the air had been pulled from my lungs. "Hi, Elena," he said softly. The sound of my name on his lips was both familiar and foreign, like a song I hadn't heard in years, but still remembered every word of. I didn't know what to say. Anger, confusion, grief, they all collided inside me. And yet, somewhere deep down, I felt something else too. Something I didn't want to name. He looked at me, hesitant. "Can I come in?" I should have said no. I should have closed the door and locked it. But I didn't. Without a word, I stepped aside. The rain followed him in. Drops fell from his coat onto the wooden floor, leaving dark spots where he stood. He looked around, his eyes scanning the living room as if trying to recognize it. The old photographs were still on the mantel, our wedding picture, the one from our trip to Italy, the one where he was carrying me in his arms on the beach. He noticed them too. His gaze softened, then fell to the envelope in his hand. He placed it on the table. "I didn't come here to make excuses," he said quietly. "I came because I needed to tell you the truth before it's too late." I crossed my arms. "The truth?" My voice cracked. "After 15 years, now you want to tell me the truth?" He didn't flinch. "I deserve that," he said. "But please, hear me out." We sat across from each other in silence. The rain tapped gently on the window, the only sound between us. Finally, he spoke. "When I left that night, it wasn't because I stopped loving you." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, of course. You left because love was too hard, right?" He looked down. "I left because I was sick." The words hung in the air. I frowned. "Sick? You mean?" He nodded. "Cancer. They told me it was bad. I thought if you saw me like that, you'd break. And I couldn't let that happen. You were always stronger than me, Elena. I didn't want you to spend your life taking care of a dying man." My heartbeat quickened. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I shook my head. "That's not your decision to make," I whispered. "You didn't even give me a choice." Tears filled his eyes. "I know. I was a coward." He leaned back in the chair, exhausted. For the first time, I noticed the tremor in his hands, the paleness of his skin. It wasn't just age, it was something deeper. The silence that followed was thick with everything unsaid. After a while, I asked quietly, "Why now?" He looked at me, his eyes hollow but honest. "Because I got a second chance. I beat it. Somehow. But I lost everything else in the process, the woman I ran to, the money, the home. I thought I could start over, but all I could think about was you. The life I threw away." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And then the doctor told me last month it's back. This time, I don't have long. I didn't want to die without seeing you again." My throat tightened. I wanted to scream at him. To tell him he didn't have the right to show up now, to dump all this on me after all these years. But the anger couldn't find its way out. It just sat there, heavy and aching. He looked around again. You kept the piano, he said softly. It's not yours to notice anymore, I snapped. He smiled faintly. You still play? I hesitated. Yes, I said finally. For the kids in the neighborhood. I remember how you used to play when you couldn't sleep, he murmured. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to Chopin, and I'd just lie there, listening. I swallowed hard, not wanting the memory to touch me. After a long silence, I asked, what do you expect me to do with this, Daniel? You show up after 15 years, tell me you're dying, and what? You want forgiveness. He shook his head. No, I just wanted you to know why. And to say goodbye, properly this time. He reached for the envelope. This was the letter I wrote the night I left. I couldn't send it. I didn't have the courage. But you should have it. He slid it across the table toward me. I didn't touch it. He stood up slowly, wincing from pain. I'll go now. I've already taken too much of your life. Something inside me cracked. I don't know why, but I stood up too. Daniel. He stopped, looking back at me, eyes glistening under the dim light. Do you still drink your tea with honey? I asked softly. He blinked, startled. Then, a faint smile. I do. I nodded toward the kitchen. Then you might as well stay until the rain stops. He sat back down. I made 2 cups of tea, just like old times. When I handed him his, our fingers brushed briefly, and I felt the ghost of something I thought had died years ago. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat in silence, sipping tea, listening to the rain. But sometimes silence can say everything words can't. That night, for the first time in 15 years, the house didn't feel empty. And even though I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, a part of me, the part that still remembered love, whispered that maybe, just maybe, forgiveness had finally found its way home.
The rain didn't stop that night. It only grew heavier, tapping against the windows like an echo of all the years between us. Daniel sat quietly on the couch, his cup of tea untouched now, steam curling into the dim light. I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap, the letter still lying unopened on the table. 15 years. And now, we were 2 strangers sitting in the ruins of a life we'd once built together. He broke the silence first. Do you ever think about the lake house? I looked up slowly. Sometimes. He smiled faintly. You used to say that place was magic. The way the water caught the sunlight, the smell of pine in the air. His voice trailed off. It was the last time I saw you happy. The word stung. I wasn't the only one who stopped being happy, Daniel, I said quietly. We both did. We just didn't know how to fix it. He nodded. You're right. I ran when I should have stayed. I thought I was sparing you pain, but I only gave you a different kind. I sighed and leaned back, staring at the flickering light of the candle on the table. Do you know what hurt the most? He looked at me, waiting. It wasn't the leaving. It was the silence. The not knowing. You became a ghost that never left the house. He swallowed hard. I didn't know how to say goodbye. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The rain softened to a whisper, and the clock ticked on the wall, a metronome of lost years. Then he said something I didn't expect. Elena, there's something else you should know. His tone changed, lower, heavier. I felt my stomach tighten. He reached into his coat pocket and took out an old photograph. He slid it across the table. It was of a young woman, maybe 25, smiling, holding a little boy. Behind them was a small cottage, somewhere rural, green. Her name was Sarah, he said softly. She was there when I was sick. When I was gone. My hands trembled as I picked up the picture. And the boy? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He hesitated. Then he said, He's my son. The world seemed to go quiet. Even the rain outside stopped for a moment. I felt the blood drain from my face. I stared at the photo, the little boy's smile bright and innocent, his eyes a reflection of Daniel's. How old is he? I asked slowly. 13, Daniel said. He was born 2 years after I left. I couldn't breathe. So you didn't just disappear to protect me, I said. My voice cracked. You started a new life. He shook his head quickly. No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't planned. I was sick, and Sarah, she helped me. She was kind. She took care of me when I couldn't take care of myself. But when I got better, she was pregnant. I stayed because I thought it was the right thing to do. But I never stopped thinking about you, Elena. The sound of my name in his mouth made me want to scream. Don't you dare say my name like that. I snapped. You had another family, Daniel. You left me to bury myself in guilt while you built a new life. Tears welled in his eyes. I didn't build anything. I was broken. And when Sarah died last year, I realized I'd lost everything twice. I came back because I didn't know where else to go. I turned away, clutching the edge of the chair just to keep myself from shaking. The clock ticked. The candle flickered. And in that tiny living room, 15 years of silence turned into a storm I couldn't contain. You know what the cruelest part is? I whispered. I prayed for you every night. I told myself you'd come home, that maybe you just needed time. I blamed myself for everything, for your leaving, for our fights, for not being enough. And all this time, you were, somewhere else. Holding another woman. Raising a child. He buried his face in his hands. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I said bitterly. Because you don't deserve it. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take them back. A long silence followed. I could hear his breath, shallow, uneven. Then he stood up, slowly. I'll go, he said quietly. I shouldn't have come. I just thought, maybe you deserved the truth. He started toward the door, his steps heavy. But just as he reached for the handle, something made me speak. Wait. He froze. I didn't know why I stopped him. Maybe it was the years of emptiness. Maybe it was the sound of his voice cracking when he said her name. Or maybe it was that photograph, the boy's eyes, so much like his. Where is he now? I asked softly. Daniel turned, surprised. He's staying with Sarah's sister. In Portland. I nodded slowly. What's his name? Eli. The name lingered in the air. Something inside me ached, a strange, heavy ache I couldn't name. Does he know about me? I asked. Daniel hesitated. No. I never told him. I couldn't. I was ashamed. We stood there in silence again. The rain had stopped, leaving only the distant sound of dripping water from the roof. Finally, I said. You should go. You look tired. He nodded weakly. Will you read the letter? I glanced at the envelope on the table. Not tonight. He lowered his head. I understand. As he stepped outside, the air was cold, the streetlights dim. He turned to look at me one last time. Elena, he said softly. Thank you, for letting me come home, even if just for a night. Then he walked away. And just like that, he was gone again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm had passed, but inside me, something was still raging. I sat by the window, the letter on my lap, unopened. The moonlight fell across the paper, soft and silver. My fingers hovered over the flap for what felt like hours. And finally, I opened it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Elena. If you ever read this, it means I've failed you in ways words can't fix. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I thought love meant protecting you from pain, even if it meant becoming the source of it. I've lived with that choice every day since. If there's anything I want you to know, it's this: I never stopped listening for your music. Even miles away, I heard your piano in my dreams. It was the only thing that made me believe in forgiveness. By the time I reached the end, my tears had blurred the ink. I whispered into the darkness. Why did you come back, Daniel? Why now? And though the room was silent, for the first time in years, I swore I heard the faintest echo of his voice. Not from outside, but from somewhere deep inside my heart. Because some goodbyes deserve one last chance to be undone. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains like it was trying to erase the night before. But no amount of light could quiet the storm inside me. Daniel's letter still lay on the table, creased, tear-stained, and heavy with everything he hadn't said in 15 years. I brewed coffee, though I barely tasted it. The city outside felt too loud, too alive for the ache sitting in my chest. Then the phone rang. Mrs. Brooks? The voice was gentle, unfamiliar. This is Dr. Hayden from Portland General. Your husband, Daniel Brooks, was admitted last night. We found your number in his wallet. My heart stuttered. Is he? He's stable for now, the doctor said carefully, but he asked for you. I stood frozen, the receiver trembling in my hand. For 15 years he'd been silent. Now, when he finally called for me, it was from a hospital bed. The bus ride to Portland felt endless. Gray skies stretched over wet highways, raindrops crawled across the window like tiny, impatient fingers. I stared at them until they blurred into the reflection of my own face, older, wearier, but still carrying a hope I didn't understand. When I reached the hospital, the smell of disinfectant hit me first. Cold, clean, merciless. At the reception, the nurse looked up. Room 214, she said softly, as if even the air around his name had to be treated with care. He looked smaller than I remembered. The years had carved deep lines into his face, the color drained from his cheeks. His eyes fluttered open when he heard the door. Elena. His voice was barely a whisper. For a moment I just stood there, clutching my purse like a shield. You should have told me you were sick. He tried to smile. Would you have come? I didn't answer. Instead, I sat by his bed and stared at the monitors. Beep. Beep. Every sound a reminder that time was running out. He reached for the drawer beside the bed and pulled out a photograph, the same one I'd seen before. But now there was writing on the back, Eli, my reason and my regret. He doesn't know you're here, Daniel said. He doesn't know much about any of this. Then maybe it's time he did, I replied quietly. That evening, I met Eli for the first time in the hospital cafeteria. He was tall for his age, with dark curls that fell over his forehead and eyes so startlingly familiar that I forgot to breathe. He looked up from his phone, cautious. You're Mrs. Brooks? Yes. My dad said you were an old friend. His tone was polite but guarded. Something like that. He studied me for a second longer, then nodded. He talks about you a lot. I felt my throat tighten. Does he? Yeah, Eli said, stirring his soda. He says you used to play the piano. That you made the house feel like it was singing. I smiled faintly. He remembered that? He never forgot, the boy said. Then, after a pause, he wanted to teach me, but he gets tired easily now. The way he said it, softly, almost apologetically, told me he knew more than he let on. Do you visit him often? I asked. Every day after school. Aunt May drives me. There was a gentleness in him that twisted my heart. For years I'd imagined Daniel happy, whole, living some perfect life. But this boy's eyes carried the same quiet loneliness I'd seen in my own. That night, back at the house, I found a letter under Eli's pillow. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. My dearest son. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. But I need you to know something, love doesn't end when a person does. It just changes its shape. Sometimes it becomes a song, a memory, or a hand that helps you find your way. Be kind to her. She was my beginning, and I hope she'll be your home. Dad. Tears blurred my vision. Eli looked at me, his own eyes wet. He left it for me the night before he, you know. I hugged him tightly. He kept his promise. He led you home. Months passed like whispered pages turning in a book I wasn't ready to close. Daniel's funeral had been small, just Eli, me, and a handful of faces that once knew him before the storms of pride scattered us apart. Every morning since, I still brewed 2 cups of coffee out of habit. One sat across the table, untouched, growing cold in the quiet light. Some routines are stubborn, they anchor the heart to what it once feared to lose. Eli stayed with me for a while after the funeral. He filled the house with the sounds I'd long forgotten, the shuffle of shoes, the clatter of a cereal bowl, a teenager humming out of tune. Sometimes I caught myself smiling before the guilt could stop me. One evening he came into the living room holding the old black notebook Daniel had left behind. "Grandma," he said, the words still new on his tongue, "do you want to help me finish Dad's last song?" I looked at the notes on the page, half-written bars, lyrics that trailed off into silence. The melody was haunting, beautiful, incomplete, like the years we'd wasted. So we began to play together. He on the guitar Daniel had taught him, and I on the piano that had collected dust since the day Daniel walked away. Each night, we filled the empty rooms with music, a conversation between generations that words could never quite carry. By spring, we had finished the song. Eli recorded it on his phone and posted it online under the title, "The Song That Stayed." Neither of us expected what happened next. Within days, thousands of people had listened. They wrote comments about lost fathers, broken families, second chances. They said the melody made them cry, that it reminded them to call home, to forgive, to begin again. Reading those messages, I realized Daniel's last wish had come true. His silence had finally found a voice. One afternoon, I sat on the porch as the sun sank behind the trees. The sky was painted in gold, the same shade as the morning we first met. I took out a small envelope I had written weeks earlier and sealed it with a trembling hand. On the front, I wrote for Eli, "When you're ready." Inside, I told him everything, about love that fails, about mistakes that linger, and about the miracle of forgiveness. I told him that family isn't built from perfection, it's built from the courage to stay even when it hurts. Years later, when Eli grew older and the world finally heard his music, people would ask him about the story behind "The Song That Stayed." He would smile and say, "It's a song my father started, and my grandmother finished." And somewhere, I believe Daniel is listening, not from the edge of regret but from the peace he always sought. Because in the end, love doesn't vanish with goodbye. It lingers, in the music, in the memories, in the moments we dare to forgive. Soft piano fades out, the sound of a single heartbeat, then silence.
Sometimes, love isn't about holding on. It's about letting someone find their way back, no matter how long it takes. Daniel left us with silence, but in that silence, we found a melody that never really ended. And now, every night, as Eli plays the piano, I can still feel him here, between every note, every breath, every heartbeat that refuses to forget. Subscribe for more heart-touching videos.